Good morning. How are you doing? What's going on? Here to drop a little knowledge on you and hopefully, hopefully you will understand about the concept of racism and bigotry. Maybe you'll get enlightened a little more about it. Maybe you won't. I don't know. But good morning. How you doing? This is the Great Podcast. Oh, recently things have been going on in this country. You know about the George Floyd trial, the trial of Derek Chauvin, the officer who was accused of murdering George Floyd live on and direct on TV. Well, on camera. He got caught on camera. Well, in past, a lot of people don't understand the true definition of racism. They think that racism has something to do with color. Totally doesn't. Racism is rooted in power and control. Okay? You can look, if you look in history, control and power is the drug that keeps some groups alive and moving. And I give you an example. The British, there was a saying many years ago that the sun never set on the British Empire. That means Great Britain controlled majority of the populations around the world and other continents around the world, including Africa, Australia, because Australia was set up as a penal colony for the British. The whole continent of Australia, they sent their worst of their worst to Australia. So when you think about it, power is pretty much what racism's big theme is. In Europe, when they were looking for some elbow room to get out and some other places to move out and possibly inhabit, that's what they were doing. They were jockeying for power. The French, the Spanish, the English, and many other groups were saying, we don't have enough room here for us to control and take over. We need a spot. We need a true spot so we can branch out. So the different rulers of these different countries said, well, you know what? Hey, we got New World over here. Of course, a lot of people were running around saying that the world was flat and there was no way they were going to navigate over the sea because there were different monsters and everything, creating fear and trepidation. Because if the other group was in fear, then that gave them the advantage to go over and scout this new world. Queen Isabella gave, we know the story, gave Christopher Columbus some money and said, go chart the new world for me. Of course, he got on the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, and he went over, yada, 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 looking for a new passage to India. Read the map wrong, and bam, he was in the New World. And the people that he saw, the native people that he saw of the world, were the ones that basically he called the Indians, which is a derogatory term. We'll get on to that one later, which was a very derogatory term to those folks because they were just native to that part of the world, which he didn't know about. Anyway, the British and the French and the Spaniards said, you know what? Well, the Spaniards, they had already started. But everybody else said, man, we need to get a foothold into this. We need to get over and get into it and see if we can get a little part. Everybody was racing to get power. Hello, racism. Racism, anytime you're trying to gain control of something or get a hold of something, it ain't got nothing to do with color. If I've got the control, if I control the board, I do whatever. It's just like the game of Monopoly. If I control all the properties, all the things, then I got control. You dance to my tune. This is a thing that has been going on in the world since God created it and put it in that shape. Got nothing to do with, oh, you black man or you Asian man or whatever. It has something to do with who has the power. Like the song Snap had, I got the power. But if I got the power, I'm going to run things. And you're going to listen to me. That's what's going on. And folks, you still run around here thinking that racism is about color. No, 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 no. What you're seeing is bigotry, which is a byproduct of racism. Okay? Then we're going to talk about the science of eugenics, how you separate, how the races were separated in certain groups, certain characteristics. I'm going to break it down to you. First on, let's deal with racism. Anyway, when you're in a race, what are you doing in a race? The base word of racism, what are you doing in a race? You're racing for position. You're racing for control. If you're in a sprint, you're racing to see who's going to get there first. Basically, that's what it was, a mad sprint. A mad sprint. If I get here first, I set the rules. In these groups, that's what they were trying to do, get there so they could set the rules and set the table and see what you were going to eat on that table. Had nothing, like I said, had nothing to do with this right here. Okay? Francois Gatton, if I got it right. If I got it wrong, let me know. Was the modern day creator of the science of eugenics. And the science of eugenics was basically breaking down different ethnic groups and different characteristics of their ethnic groups and placing them into a certain position. As they would do, they would look at the Asian population. These people who came from this region of the world, and they went with the characteristic: the slanted eyes, the yellow skin, the certain features that they had, and they classed them as, okay, you're this. And it went so forth and so on. The red folks from a different region, well, you have these characteristics. You have this straight face or slow forehead or whatever, you're that. And they continued on. They even brought that crap across the water to the United States. If you belong to a certain group, that's what you are. When God Himself said, I created the human race. I didn't create this. I created humans. I created people in my own image. I don't care what color you are, you were created in my image. But these folks, and I'm going to go right there. These folks believed, bear with me, I'm working. These folks believe that that's how that's broken down. If you belong to that group of people, that's where you stay. Kind of like in India with their caste system. If you belong in a certain caste, you can't get with this group. Stay with your own. So the separation of races was done through science and genetics, what you were genetically disposed to do, like we still do today. Like certain groups are not capable of doing certain things. Like this genetic group was genetically created to be the super athletes, the super whatever. Jimmy the Greek Snyder, who was a broadcaster with CBS Sports, got in trouble one time. Well, he did get in trouble when he said that Black men were bred and built to do certain labor on the plantations. Their calves and their traps and everything else, they were built to do certain things. That people said, well, Chinese were genetically better in the sciences of math and engineering and whatever, which proven to be, that's a lie. Either you are talented and diligent in certain things, and it has nothing to do with your race. Either you're talented or diligent in something, or you're not. Or whites were made to be leaders and movers and shakers, and that's a myth. All of these myths have been created to create separation or to create a power vacuum. And like I said, if a particular group gets control, they're going to set the table. And unfortunately, that's what's going to create racism. Hear me now, when a certain group gets a certain control of all aspects of life, guess what? You're going to play by their rules. And we're seeing it play out. I'm not afraid to say it. White supremacy, we're seeing it play out. When people say racism and white supremacy, they have a basis. They have the truth. because guess what? That's who grabbed the power. Now, other groups fall up under there and follow their so-called master to try to get a foothold or try to get a little crumb off the table, but not happening. You'll see some ethnic groups who will side with the controlling group so they can, be spared the torture or spared the degradation or discrimination. But the controlling group is only going to let you get to so far before they say, we don't want you there. And that's what racism is all about. Power and control. If I have the power and the control to affect every aspect of life that you are accustomed to, then I am the dominator. I am that dude. I'm that person. You're gonna, like I said, if I play the music, you're gonna dance to it, unless you rebel. Now, bigotry, which we're seeing, what we've seen in centuries past, that's a byproduct of racism. Bigotry is straight up hate. When you straight up hate somebody that is different from you, that's bigotry. When you look at a group of people and you say, man, I wish a tidal wave will wipe them out, that's straight up hate. Or you do something to them, not because they did anything to you, you just do it to them because you just feel like, hey, man, I want these people gone. That's bigotry. Now, I've had people who I talked to about this totally don't want to talk to me anymore, and that's fine. Don't make me no difference. I was just telling you the truth. I wasn't trying to sugarcoat or whitewash anything. That's what racism is. It has nothing to do with color. It has everything that does with power. Power. When we said 45 was racist, he wanted power. You've seen what happened on January 6th of this year. When people who were so mesmerized and in a trance for this one particular dude to have power that they were willing to risk their lives, risk their freedom to protect this man's so-called power that he had cast, this control that he had cast over all these people. Still got it over some of these people. You see it in Georgia. How they conveniently changed their voting laws so they can keep power. People do things so they can keep power. They don't want to associate themselves with other people because they want to keep their power. If you're wealthy, you're rich, or whatever, you don't want to get with the commoners. Even when Jesus was on the earth, the so-called ruling class looked at Jesus and said, hey, man, why you over there messing with the unwashed? Why you over there messing with those people? Why you over there doing that, man? We don't need you to do that. Don't over there associate yourself with the unclean man. There was even racism when Jesus was born. That's why Mary and Joseph had to go somewhere else because it was doing tax collecting time. They was checking them households. So wait a minute. They trying to add a little more mouth. They got another little mouth to feed. No. They got to pay a little bit more taxes there. They was taxing people. If you had extra bodies in the house, oh, no. You had to pay the Roman government. You had to pay Caesar. Render under Caesar what was Caesar's. The Samaritans didn't deal with the Jews. Now, you know the story in the Bible about the Good Samaritan. This man got beaten and robbed and knocked on the street, laid there on the street. The rabbi went past him, the priest went past him, or whoever else went past him. And the Samaritan, just coming down the road, said, hey, man, this person in need, man. He ain't get there by himself. Went in there, helped the man up, cleaned him up, took him to a place where he could get care and whatever. And said, whatever else cost that comes up, put it on my bill. I got them. Yeah, the Jews and the Samaritans didn't get along with each other. The Gentiles and the Jews and Gentiles didn't get along. The Greek didn't get along with this group. They didn't get along with this group. That had nothing to do with color. It's who had power. If the Romans had the power, guess what? The Romans called the shots. If the Greeks had the power, that's who called the Greco-Roman Empire. That's who ran things. You did what they said do, not what you thought was going to happen. And there was many different colors of folk. But if you up under that empire, you going to dance to that music. And you run around and tell, well, they racism, they racist. No. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. See, racism is like a drug. Once you get a hook on it, once you get that sniff, once you get that taste, you don't want it out your mouth. Let's fast forward it to the place we call America. Now, like I told you, those groups was fighting for power to get into the new world because they saw new opportunities. They figured, well, if we can get our piece, we're going to control this thing here. And in 1619, when the first group of folk got here, not the ones who came a year later calling themselves the Pilgrims who landed on Plymouth Rock. Well, there was Jamestown, Virginia, a whole year before that. And like I said, these folks had control. They had power. They said, well, shoot, we just set our foot on this land, this house. Let's look at Georgia. Lord Oglethorpe, a British of the British ruling class, founded Georgia. Lord Baltimore for Maryland. and so forth and so on. South Carolina. These people saw this land, they took it over. They brought other people in their groups to farm that land and clear that land. And hey, the first 13 U.S. colonies, whoever had the power had the control. The people who set up our Constitution were powerful, wealthy landowners who had the power. You did what they say. You rocked how they rocked. And if you came in thinking you was going to go above these folks, they clearly will find ways to bring you down. And that goes to this point about, the rise in Asian American hate crimes. This practice has been going on for centuries. It ain't gonna change because one group feels disrespected. They don't care. The powerful and the controlling groups are gonna set the tables unless we educate each other and look to end it. Look to end racism, classism, sexism, all them isms we need to take out because they are the byproduct of racism. Remember, the controlling class is setting the table. The controlling class doesn't want women to rise above them. Hell, why you think they didn't let women vote until 1920? Why you think they held that back? If women in this country had to go through a movement just to cast a ballot, what do you think? Y'all see where I'm getting at, don't you? The sad thing is that when I hear people talking about, well, you just made a racist statement. No, I didn't make a racist statement because I know what racism is. Racism ain't got nothing to do with your ethnic background, your color, your skin, how your hair look, nothing. Now, if I make a hateful statement towards you, I'm being a bigot. And everybody can be a bigot because bigotry is hate. Everybody can be prejudiced. Prejudice means to prejudge something. And a lot of us have been prejudiced about a lot of things. Food, clothes, where certain groups live. All of us are guilty of that. And all of us are guilty of bigotry. Because bigotry is straight up hate. You hate a group because whatever. Some of us are bigots against one another, against our own kind. When you talk about, I hate that side of the city, or I hate this group around me, that's bigotry. That's hate. That ain't got nothing to do with racism. That's what we should be trying to say, stomp out bigotry, stomp out hate. And promote, hey, you have a right to love who you want to love. You have the right to have the style that you want to have. You have a right to say, hey, I want to go marry that person from another group because that's who I fell in love with. You should have a right to go to the school you want to go to without quotas. You should have a right to live where you want to live, worship how you want to worship. All these things you should have a right to do in spirit and in truth. And nobody should tell you what you shouldn't do. That's how that breaks down. You want to end racism? Knock out the powerful top, because that's what racism is. The people sitting up on top trying to wield the power over free people, trying to tell you, well, no, you ain't supposed to do this. Or the people who are in control telling people, well, we're going to stop your car because you're an ethnic group. Well, I've been driving in this neighborhood. What's the problem? See, you want to go against the people who gave Derek Chauvin the power to put his knee on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. See, they ain't tell you the other part. That's the people you want to say, hey, man, this world is free. God made this world free. Don't nobody have no one power and one control to tell people what to do. We all work together so we can get that done. Not one group saying, well, he was doing this. See, we get to the science of eugenics. Like I told you, Francois Gouton said that we're going to make this genetic race, we're going to create this genetic scene where, hey, we don't want any other things mixed together. We're going to try to make these perfect little groups. And they're going to be that master class of people that control these other mongrels, that control these other lower classes above. During World War II, the Nazis wanted to create the Aryan race, the master race, the blonde haired, blue eyed, powerful race. They had scientists and doctors who did genetic experiments on people to build a certain type of master race. Oh, yeah. Because they wanted to develop power. They wanted to develop control. You get where I'm coming from? They wanted to make sure that this race of people controls what they call the other mongrel classes and races. Everybody else will be beneath them, and they would say, hey, we're going to pick and choose. Everybody did it. Napoleon tried to do it with the French. The Spaniards took their turn. That's why when they claimed certain lands for themselves, like Cuba, like South America, because they wanted their race to be the master kind, to have that control. This racism. You race to control whatever, wherever you are. That's racism. That's colonization. These folks wanted to move into the biggest places with the biggest populations where they could control that group. They looked at the continent of Africa and said, good goodness. They came in, they used whatever tools necessary. Religion. Well, you're an infidel. You don't believe in God. You don't believe in one deity. When the African people truly believed in one deity. And they worshiped one deity. They worshiped in their way of spirit and truth. That's how they worship. But the other group said, no, 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 no. That's not how you get down. And they call these things crusades. When technically, there were no crusades. That was their way of going into and controlling what they thought was a weaker and an underdeveloped group. And it was continued all over the world. Remember I said the sun never set on the British Empire? Well, the Brits went into India. Why do you think when the colonists were throwing the tea over in Boston Harbor, did you ever look at that box of tea? It said the East India Tea Company, where the Brits had totally went over into India and said, you know what? You up under British rule now. You gonna do what we say do. You gonna tap dance to the British Empire. And that's why you see so many people of India, they have, ties to England because England went in and so-called colonized these people. It's the truth. While they went into China, they ruled, the British had ruled in Hong Kong for well over a whole century before they finally gave it back to the Chinese. That's why you see a lot of British influence inside of China to this very day. Not that much, but Vietnam. The French went into Vietnam and said, well, you know what? Y'all gonna tap dance to French rule. Until the Vietnamese gave them that ass whooping that they weren't expecting and ran them out of there. But you still see some vestiges of that rule. We tried to go into Vietnam 10 years later and try to do what the French couldn't do. And the Vietnamese gave us that ass whipping as well. Ho Chi Minh gave us that ass whooping. So you're not going to come in here and think you're going to control us. This is our country. We do things the way we get down. We get down the way we get down here. That's why we have that memorial over on the mall called the Vietnam Vets Memorial. 60,000 men and women lost their lives because somebody wanted to wield control. Racism. Wanted to wield control over people that didn't need their control, didn't want their control. We fought world wars because some groups wanted control over one another. That's racism. That ain't war, that's racism. The Japanese invaded China. And went in and say, hey, you know what? Y'all gonna dance to Japanese rule. If you watch the movie Fist of Fury with Bruce Lee, it tells you that story. in one scene where Bruce Lee wanted to walk into a park, and the dude, I guess he was Indian descent or whatever, said, "You can't go in here." Bruce Lee said, "Well, this is my country. I should be able to go where I want to go." And the sign said, "No, no dogs, no Chinese." And Bruce standing there saying, "Well, this ain't right." And when the guy tried to put his hands on Bruce, you know what Bruce did. And then Bruce got the sign, jumped up in there and kicked it and smashed the sign. Well, there were signs just like that in America. Whites only. Didn't matter how much money you had in your pocket, didn't have what prestige you had, you couldn't go in there. They had signs up too, no Irish, no dogs, and no Irish. No slant eyes. Talking about Asians. This science of eugenics that have broken down the races already, which happened over in Europe, and they brought it over to the United States and they adapted it real well. If you were a certain ethnic group, you better not bring your happy tail up in there. If you saw the movie The Green Book, this book was published by our brother, I think Victor Green. He was an American postman, African American postman who created a book. So if, like we always say, some of us say, well, we going down to the country. Well, if you took a ride down to the country, you had a book that tell you where you can go eat, where you can go lay your head, where you can go to the bathroom. But the system of racism that controlled these things, remember I say control, that control these things, that control this power, was alive and well. And it ain't nothing, like I keep telling you, it ain't nothing to do with color. It says who's in control. They let you know who is in control. If it said whites only, you best believe it was whites only. And I don't care what other group. You can be Asian, you can be Indian. If you was anything but white, you wasn't going up in there. Now you might get on your knees and please, 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 like James Brown, and beg somebody to get in. They might let you, but best believe you wouldn't get in there. That was racism, ladies and gentlemen. What happened with the racism, the lynchings, the burnings, the sicking of the dogs? That was bigotry. That was the byproduct of racism. You have to have something to help you control the masses. You have to enact laws. You have to enact codes. You have to enact certain things to keep that control. And as time went on, when those laws were repealed and those barriers was knocked down, the controlling group, the so racist group, they had to create more to keep control. See, when you got power and you got control, you have to create things so you can keep that power and control, or you will lose a grip on that power and control. And by God, there are things happening in this country as we see today that is loosening that racist grip, that racist power that's taking it away. Now, you still have some people who are fighting for that vestige of power. You seen it, like I said, you seen it on January 6th. People storming the Capitol to protest on a legally binding election. You got people even run around here still saying it was fraudulent. How is it that it was fraudulent when you lost? When you set up these rules, you set up these things, whatever, but it didn't work for you. Now, how is it fraudulent? I tell you what's fraudulent. Racism is fraudulent because it has no base. It has no merit. It has nothing. All it is about who controls who tells who what to do. It got nothing to do. Like I said, it ain't got nothing to do with who's black, who's white, who's Asian, who's Native American, who whatever. It says who got power. And what we have to understand is it should be an equal distribution of power. That's what makes you a united class. That's what makes you a powerful class. When no group can say whatever, whatever. We had it with the presidency. Nobody had a problem with 43 white men running this country. Or when one man who was actually biracial took power in this country for 8 years, there was a problem. And that's where that science of racism and eugenics come from. Because that eugenics will state that no man of a Mongol race should have been able to take power. Shouldn't have been able to do that. Now, I'm not the one saying this has been said long before I came on this earth. And I'll be 53 in a few weeks. In actually 13 days. These came out of it. The Mongol race should be up under the ruling race. They even tried to use the Bible as a reference. That God cast out the Mongol race, which is a big lie. Over that line on God, and people believe them. People still believe them to this very day. They call evangelicals. Mm-hmm. They had last names like Falwell, Baker, Robertson. Although they have a couple of us in there just to say, well, we're not like that. The Paula Whites of the world. Yeah, folk run around call her Mama Paula. Mama Paula what? She ain't your mama. She ain't nothing but a person that's supposed to be preaching the gospel. And people run around there calling her mama. You saw her jumping up and down in the pool. I feel the spirits of this. I feel the spirits of that. I feel the spirits. I feel the spirits. What you should have been saying, I denounce the spirit of racism. I denounce the spirit of bigotry. I denounce the spirits of this. Said you talking about, I feel the spirits. The angels are coming from Africa. Really? Really, Paul? When I saw that, it looked like to me she had to go to the bathroom. She was jumping around. She had to go to the bathroom. But you ain't heard from her. You ain't heard from none of these people condemning what happened to George Floyd. But yet and still they will promote the vestiges of a certain dude who was the 45th president of the United States. You see them espousing his views, but his racist views, as I say, powerful. Remember, racism is about power. You don't believe me? Pull up a video or Dick Gregory and let Dick Gregory explain to you what racism is. Well, I try to do my little part. I try to do my little part in making the world better and not have that spirit take over me, because the word of God says that we're not in a war with flesh and blood. If we was with flesh and blood, we'd be all right, because we same thing, but we're dealing with spirits and the wickedness in high places. We deal with spirits. You don't deal with a person, you deal with that spirit of that person. And there's a spirit that has been running rampant for a long time. It's called racism, and its byproduct is called bigotry. And once we figure out what those are and we work to end that, then we probably gonna be all right. But if we don't, well, we're gonna get what we get. I'll holler at you later.